Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Lamed Zayin in Baba Basra. Daf Lamed Zayin. Now, yesterday we got down to the fifth line of Daf Lamed Zayin, and again we learned for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Sunnah Batzar B'Shivya, and may our enemies continue to fall, not just one by one, but many at a time. Okay. So now we've been talking this whole parak about the chazaka of 3 years, right? 3 years or 3 crops, depending on the different shitas. But there we're talking about the chazaka of proof of purchase, meaning where's your bill of sale? I had it, but I lost it. 3 years have passed. I'm not expected to keep it. There we're talking about the chazaka being a proof of purchase, but I have a claim that I bought it. The other kind of chazaka means taking hold of something. For example, when I buy a piece of land or of Eved Kanani, there's 3 ways to get it. Kesef, shtar, chazaka, 3 ways to acquire it. Either paying cash for it. If I want to buy your house and I give you cash, that's a deal. That's right there. That nothing more need be done. Right? I give you cash. Or we write a bill of sale, or I take hold of it. I demonstrate possession. How do I do that? Put a lock on it. If it's a field or a tree, I'll dig around it a little bit, just do a little work around it. That's a different kind of chazaka. We're going to talk about that kind of. We're going to go back to talk about that chazaka thing today. In general, Baba Basra, the chazaka we're talking about is the chazaka of 3 years, which is proof of purchase. It has nothing to do with taking hold of the property. Yes, it's obviously based on 3 years of uncontested occupancy. And if you have that, that gives you what we call the presumptive title. The chazaka, you have a chazaka, presumptive title. You've been there for 3 years and you said you bought it, but you just don't have the document anymore. That's the chazaka there. The other kind of chazaka is actually, how do I make a kinyan? How do I actually acquire it? Was it a shtar that was holding on for 3 years? Was it kesef? That's all you need. You can't buy metalton kesef. If I want to buy a carton of milk, that's not acquired with money. Obviously, you have to pay for it, but I could acquire it. I can't acquire it just by paying cash for it, as we've learned. The rice is drabanan, but you have to make a kinyan. You have to pick it up or pull it or do something of that sort. Now, we're at the fifth line on Daf Lamed Zayin. And he says like this. This the chazaka we're talking about here is when you acquire it. When you acquire it, meaning we're not talking about 3 years over here at this point. We're talking about how do I acquire it, meaning what happened. Yankel had a field, and the field had some trees. Yankel sold the land to Ruvain and the trees to Shimon. That's what he did. I'm selling you the land and you the trees. Now, normally, we're going to talk about this later on in the next few talking, but we've had it many times before. If a mocher sells to Lokeach a field, okay, he tells him this is the field. These are the boundaries. That's the field. If he sells him 1 or 2 trees, does the guy get the karka with it? He didn't mention anything about karka. Now, if you specify it today, we have lawyers and they write everything, they'll die. They get paid according to how many pages. If you give a 1-page contract, that's a minimum one. That's the one I always use. But the lawyers like to make 10, 11 pages, 12 pages, a few pages of hoil, and then a few more of those, and they stretch it out as long as they can because it looks like they did some work. So they'll get extra pay. The more they can charge out, but they do specify things. Here we're talking about. So if he said, "Listen, I'm selling you a tree." And I'm selling you 2 trees. And, with the 2 trees, you're going to get 20 amos or 20 yards around each tree. Okay, you're very specific. But let's say I just sold you a tree in general. I just sold you a tree. That's all you own is a tree. I can't tell you, well, uproot the tree as is and get it out of my land because I sold you the tree with the understanding that it's growing the fruits, etc. However, if I only sold you 1 or 2 trees and those trees eventually die, payers are gone, they stopped giving them, they die, then I can say, get your tree out of here. I didn't sell you any land. If I sold you 3 trees, then the assumption is you get the land with it too. That's how we're going to see later on. That's when one person is selling to one person. Mocher lokeach. If I sell you 1 tree or 2 trees, you don't get any land with it. You have the trees as long as they're alive. Once they're gone, you can't plant other ones there. That's my land. But if I sell you 3 trees, the assumption is I'm selling you the land between the 3 trees as well. The 3 trees usually form a triangle of some sort, right? Usually it's 3 trees. It could be in a straight line too, but you're entitled to the land between them. That's the assumption. The land between the trees and the land around the trees that are necessary to service the trees. That's when it's a one mocher, one lokech. Over here, Yankel, the mocher, had a field with trees, and he sold Reuben the land, and he sold Shimon the trees. So what's the deal there? So the Gemara says like this: so one guy made a chazaka. Again, the chazaka is not the 3-year chazaka. Here's the chazaka is the acquisition, the kinyan that he made by demonstrating ownership. So one guy, the guy who bought the trees, that's Shimon. He made a chazaka on the trees. He dug around a little bit, showed ownership. So what's the deal? That's it. In this case, because there were 2 different people, he sold one the land and one the trees. The guy who got the trees got no karka with it at all, according to Rav Svid. Papa says if he's got no land at all, what happens when those trees die? When they die, balakarka. So the owner of the karka, that's Reuben. Again, Reuben bought the land. Shimon bought the trees. So when the trees die, Reuben could tell Shimon, uproot your dead trees, go take them, and get out of here. Go. That's what he could do, according to Rav Zvid. Because Rav Zvid said, this is not a case where it was one seller and one buyer, and the buyer bought 3 trees out of the seller's land. If he bought 3 or more trees, he's entitled to the land too. But here, he sold Reuben all the land, he sold Shimon all the trees. That's what he just said. He didn't specify you get the trees with a little piece of karka. He just said, I'm selling you the land, I'm selling you the trees. So if that's the case, says Rav Papa Rav Zvid, the way you're saying it, that the guy only gets the trees, then when the trees die, he can't plant the other ones there. The Reuben can tell Shimon, get out of here. Elam Rav Papa says that's not fair. So Rav Papa doesn't want it that way. He says Zekoni Ivanos v'chatzi karka, Zekoni chatzi karka. He says that's not the way it works. If Reuben bought the land and Shimon bought the trees, it's not fair that he shouldn't be able to plant trees to replace those ones who died, but rather, if he sold him the land, he sold him the tree, and he sold Reuben the land, and he sold Shimon the trees. So Reuben Enachami gets the land, but Shimon gets the land and gets the trees and half the karka. Now Rashbam says that maybe they half is lav dafka. It doesn't mean half. It means he got enough land to take care of his trees, and if the trees die, he can plant other trees there too. In other words, he didn't do it that way. So Papa learns that when Yankel sold Reuben the land and he sold Shimon the trees, as we'll see later on, he says Shimon could say to Reuben, just like he sold you the land that you can work that land in perpetuity, it's always going to be yours. I want to be able to work my trees in perpetuity, and if these trees die, I want to plant other ones there too. So he gets. So Shimon does get, besides the trees, he gets some of the land too. Now Rashbam says that Chatzi Zekoliros v'Chatzi Karka. Rashbam says Rashbam is even with this last tosus on the page, the beginning of the last tosus. Lataf Chatzi Karka. In other words, whatever is necessary to treat the trees, meaning to plow around them and treat them and between them and to harvest around them with the basket, etc. Or you could say maybe dafka means half. You really need all the land is necessary for the trees. Remember, we learned that if you have saplings, you have to have 10 saplings. The normal way is 10 saplings in an area of 2,500 square amas, a base saw. And if they're grown trees, then you have 3 in that area. So over here, it could be that all the land is the trees need all that land. But the problem is that he sold the land to somebody else. Even if there's only 2 trees, the Kamla Mochas Asfina, Aila and Karka, even though we said if I sell you, remember I said at the beginning, if I sell you 2 trees, you don't get any Karka. But over here, Yeshlam to keep him the Shnei Lekukah saying, Shekona Biyachad, Matzi Amalei Baladas Balakorka, Kiechdulas Be'en. He could say, look, just like he sold you. Normally, I said if it's one mocher and one lokeach, I sell you 2 trees, you don't get the karka. But over here, when I specifically said to this guy, you get the karka, and Reuben gets the karka, and Shimon gets the trees, Shimon can say to Reuben, just like you have your karka, and he meant to sell you your karka, and you could use it in perpetuity for the next 1,000 years, and your children could use it. Me too. I want to have these trees in perpetuity. So it's okay, because they didn't have lawyers. They didn't have attorneys. We're talking about, exactly, that's what I said at the beginning. We're talking about where Yankel said to Yankel had Reuben and Shimon here, and he said they'd like to buy something today. So okay, I'll sell you the karka and I'll sell you the trees. What's understood there? You're right. If you would say, listen, I'm selling you the trees and 10 yards or 10 amos around each one, so that's very specific, and there's no issues. There's no issues there. We're going to talk about a case later on when he had such a claim. When he said, yeah, I only bought one, or if a guy said, we said before, if you have one mocha and one lokech, and he sold him 1 or 2 trees, he gets no karka with it. That's the understanding. But if he said specifically, I'm selling you 1 tree and the land around it, so when the tree dies, you can plant another one, yeah, that's okay. But we're talking about, we said, stop, I'm selling you the land, I'm selling you the trees. So Reb Zvit says, that's it. He's only got those trees, and when those trees die, the other guy, the owner of the karka, can kick him away. Rav Papa says, no, that's not how it's understood. When I sell Reuben the land and you the trees, you get the trees and some of the karka so that you can replant when they die. This is in a stam case. Now, Shita, Macher Karka, V'shayri Lanas Lefanav. Now, what happens if, let's say, now you didn't have 2 people, you had 1 person. He says, listen, I'm selling you the karka. I'm the seller, I'm selling you only the karka, I'm keeping the trees for myself. So what do I have there? Now, what do you say there? Do I get the land with it? I'm entitled to some karka. What am I going to do? In these trees die, I'm not going to have anything. I feel Rav Akiva, even Rav Akiva holds on mocher buying yafa mocher. We're going to see later on Rav Akiva shita. Rav Akiva is a famous shita that a person who sells generously. What do we mean by that? The famous case is I sell you a house or a field, and the house or the field in the yard has a bore there, a well or a cistern. And for water. So the understanding is that I'm selling you only the house. I didn't sell you the bore, right? What about the land leading to the bore? The bore is on the side of the house. What about that? Well, I sold you the land. I sold you the karka. I didn't even leave anything for myself. I didn't leave anything for myself. Why? Because I sell you generously. I sell you the house and the field and the land, and I don't even have a way to get to to my own bore. I've got to ask your permission or fly a helicopter in there to get to my bore. Even Rabbi Akiva, though, there says that a person who sells generously, mocher buying yafa mocher, and therefore he doesn't even keep for himself the path to his bore. That's when you talk about a well or a cistern. Didn't say a well and cistern is a well is simply dug out in the ground, and a cistern is lined with stone. It's the same idea, but it's firm there. So what happens is that if I sell you a field, let's say, and I kept for myself the bore, and I didn't even leave myself a pathway for it. You know why? Because I said there's not going to be any issue about that because my bore is not damaging your property. So if you want to use that yard or if it's a field and you want to plant around that, my bore is not doing. So I don't anticipate any disagreements. You're not going to complain to me. Get rid of your bore. It's damaging my property. So I didn't even think about it. I just kept the bore for myself, and I'm a generous guy. Rabbi Akiva was a very fine person, and he said he sells it generously. I didn't even keep a path for myself. There, I didn't keep anything myself. But if I sell you, in this case, I sell you the karka, and I kept the trees for myself. I know, what's going to happen one day? You're going to complain about my trees. My trees are damaging. They're impairing your field because the roots or something. If you have, let's say, you're planting corn or wheat or whatever, and there's trees there, the roots of the trees can damage your crop. So there, the makashia. But if I'm selling you, when I sell you the karka and I left for myself the trees, I believe that the makashia that they impair the ground. Shiur shar, I certainly left over some land for myself. So again, if I sell you 1 or 2 trees, you only get the trees, you don't get any karka. If I'm selling to 2 people, Reuben and Shimon, Reuben gets the land, the other gets the karka, we have machlokas between Rav Zvit and Rav Papa. Does the guy who get the trees get some karka with it or not? That's a machlokas. Over here, if I sell you all my land and I kept the trees for myself, did I keep some land for myself? So here the Gemara says yes. Cheetah, if I sell you the land, I left some trees, I'm entitled to some karka because I would have thought about it. Because if I don't have any karka, you'll say, listen, my trees are damaging your crops over here. So I must have left some area around the trees for myself, right? Dilo Shiur, lay malay. If I didn't leave anything over, lay malay, you could say when my trees die, you'll say, again, uproot your tree, Brazil, and get out of here. Okay, that's in a case where I sold you the land and I kept the trees for myself. What happens if I sold you the trees? I'm one person, I'm selling you the trees and I keep the land for myself, right? What do you say over there? If I sell you the trees and I left the karka for myself, well, does the guy who get the trees get anything? If we're talking about 1 or 2 trees, we said before, if I sell you 3 trees, you're entitled to the karka between them. If I sell you 1 or 2 trees, what do you say there? That's a machlokas Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanan. The Rabbi Kiva, the Mocha buying Yafa Mocha. According to Rabbi Kiva, says that the one who sells generously, right? It's like, even though I only sold you 1 or 2 trees, I sold you 1 or 2 trees, right? You're entitled to some karka with it too. The Rabbanan Leslie, the Rabbanan who sells, no, the person who sells doesn't do it generously. All I did was I sold you the tree. I sold you 1 or 2 trees. You're not entitled to the karka, like we said before. The Rabbi Kiva Islay, again, explaining according to Rabbi Kiva, the person who bought the trees, even though it's only 1 or 2 trees, says Rashban. Take a look at Rashban, even where we are. We're talking about 2 trees. Everybody's money, you get the karka there. Here we're talking about when you bought 1 or 2 trees. So you bought 2 trees. According to Rabbi Kiva, the person who bought the trees is entitled to the karka too. Rabbi Kiva is like, I feel Rab Zvid. It's not the machloks we had on our between Rab Zvid and Rab Papa, where I sold to 2 different people, one the karka, one the trees, and we said according to Rab Zvid, the guy who gets the trees gets no karka, and Rab Papa says no, he gets some karka with it too. Even though Rab Zvid said I'm an aleph, the Amar Eilo, that the boy about the trees has no karka. That's where there was 2 people. Yankel sold the land to Reuben and the trees to Shimon. The Amar Lei, there, Reb Zvid says, the Amar Lei Ki'echidu Leslie Bilanos. There, the person Reuben who bought the karka could say, listen, I'm not entitled to the trees at all. He sold me the land and he sold you the trees. You don't get any land. Just like when I bought the land, I don't get any of the trees. When you bought the trees, you get no karka. The didochnami lesach b'karka. So that's where Reb says over there when he sold it to 2 different people. Avul hacha, but over here, mocher b'ayin yafa mocher. In other words, according to Rabbi Kiva, if a person bought 1 or 2 trees from the seller just sold to, there was one seller, one purchaser. He bought 1 or 2 trees. According to Rabbi Kiva, the guy gets the karka. The guy who bought the trees gets some karka with it too. Even according to Rav Zvid and Amal said that the guy who bought the trees gets no karka. That's where he sold the karka to one guy. He sold to Reuben. He sold the trees to Shimon. So Reuben could say, just like I have no share in the trees, I only bought the karka. You have no share in the karka. But over here, it's where it's one seller, one buyer. Mocher b'ayin yafa. The Rabbanan who disagreed, would even say, listen, if I sell you my house or my field and there's a bore there, a well, and I'm keeping the bore for myself, I'm entitled to a path to the bore too. How else am I going to get to my bore if I don't have a path to get there? So I didn't sell generously. The Rabbanan Leslie, according to Rabbanan, the guy who bought 1 or 2 trees has no karka with it. Even Rav Papa who said I'm an aleph, right, when he sold to Reuben and Shimon, and Rav Papa said Shimon who bought the trees gets some karka with it too, either half or some amount of karka to treat the trees, right? Even Rav Papa says that the guy bought the trees has some of it. Hani Mili Gabi Shefas, again, that's where there was 2 purchases. The Amalei, because there, the person who bought the trees can tell the person who bought the karka, just like the seller sold it to you generously, you bought the karka, you can use that karka in perpetuity. The dinami buying yafa, he sold it to me also that I can have these trees in perpetuity. And when these trees die, we'll get other trees. I'm entitled to that in perpetuity. But over here, where it's one seller and one buyer, and I have a land and I have trees and I sold you 1 or 2 trees, you're not entitled to any land at all. That's machlokas between Rav Kiva and the Rabbanan, and it's not dependent on the machlokas Rav Zvid and Rav Papa because they're talking about where there were 2 purchasers. One guy bought the land, one guy bought the trees. Rav Zvid looks at it and says, "Listen, just like the owner of the karka can say, just like I bought the karka in all of it, and I don't have any share in the trees. You bought the trees, you have no share in the karka." And according to Rav Papa says he gets some share over there because he could say, the person who bought the trees can say, just like you have yours in perpetuity, I want mine in perpetuity. Those are the arguments there. But where it's one seller and one buyer, so we said, and I'm an aleph, if I sold you the karka and I kept the trees for myself, I probably have some karka with it too, because otherwise they'll kick me out. And if I sold you the land, if I sold you the trees rather, and didn't sell you the karka, that's the machlokas between Rabbanan and Rabbi Kiva. Now, Amri Ardoi, they said in Ardoi said a few things. One thing that they said is, Achlun Mitzufan Ein Lo Chazaka. So Rashi has two pshat, Rashbam has two pshatim over here. We'll take his preferred second pshat. What does that mean? Let's say it's very common that when they originally plant, you ever go to a nursery, what do? When the plants are young, they plant a lot of them together till they start growing. Then when they start getting bigger, they uproot them, they replant them elsewhere, right? That's what normally happens. Now, with trees, it's like that too, because with trees, if let's say we said 10 saplings go into an area of 2,500 square amos. If once they're big trees, then it's 3 trees per 2,500 amos. So he says like this, if he ate them, I'm looking at Rashbam now, in the wide lines in Rashbam on the left side, they're about 15 lines down. Since they're going to be replanted, in other words, if he bought them, if he took possession of them while they were still in their young state and they were crowded together, they were bunched together, is that a chazak? After they grow, you spread them out. So this is not a way to make chazaka because you didn't treat them, you didn't handle them in the normal way that they grow. The normal way, when they grow, they're spread out more. Now, what chazaka are we speaking about over here? So Rashbam says, actually Rashbam a little bit further. Let's say here he's talking about the chazaka of 3 years, right? So if you made a chazaka in this form, right? In this form when they weren't the normal way it was done because they were bunched together. So he says, it's a way for aspastas, either some sort of, it's either alfalfa or clove or something like that you plant a lot together. So that you didn't make a chazaka on that case. In other words, that's not a proper chazaka if you did it in not the way that they're going to grow when they grow later on. That's eno chazaka. That's not a chazaka. Even a chazaka, the traditional chazaka of cheskes abatim of 3 years, because here we're talking about consuming them. You didn't consume it in a normal way. Rav asked Elameata, high measure daspasta. Let's say you have a row of clover or a row of this alfalfa. How do you call that? When you buy a row of alfalfa, it's also crowded together too much. How do you acquire that? Ela Merava. So if you say you can't acquire it when it's bunched together in its early stage, Ela Merava, Machar Ritzufan Ein Lo Karka. We're not talking about a chazaka. A chazaka of 3 years that you occupied, you had uncontested occupancy over this land for 3 years. Sure, that's a chazaka, even if it's bunched together. But what he means is this: if you ate them too close together, you don't have any karka there. The concept of why do you get karka? Because you need to treat it. But here in Lo Karka, he says, Rashbam says, Gilon Shenatu and Yoser Miyud the base. So let's say you have more than 10 saplings planted in an area of 2,500 square meters. Lo Amin Hakona Shloshi Ivanas Kona Karka. The Ein Zu, the Ein Soda Eiland Lako Shashkami. Meaning this. We're not talking about a chazaka. Now he's changing. We're not talking about a chazaka of 3 years that you didn't occupy it in the normal way you occupied it. Like if it's a store, you occupy it during the day. If it's a house, day and night. If it's land, you got to do it the normal way that it's kept. No, we don't mean that. We don't mean that kind of chazaka. We mean that this idea that if you acquire trees, do you get the karka with it? That has to be only if they're planted the way they're normally going to grow to adulthood. If they're planted too close together, though you don't say if you buy 3 trees you get the karka. In other words, that's not a normal tree. Even a tree of saplings, a field of saplings where you have 10 to the 2,500 square amos to the base of. But if you had more than 10, if you had 10, or you had 15 or whatever, that's not the normal way it grows. That's not a sada ilan. That's made to uproot. You're not going to keep them there. They can't exist if you have 50. If you have more than 10 in such an area. Therefore, you don't get the karka with it. So what Rav is saying is the machur sufan that Joy mentioned that if you consume them or you occupy them in a way that they're too close together, that's not, you can't make a chazaka like that. It's not the normal way that people occupy the land and treat the land. We're not talking about making a chazaka. We're talking about, do you acquire the land? If you bought 3 trees like that, or you bought a field of too many trees, there's no karka there at all, because that's going to be uprooted anyway. It's not made to serve. The whole idea is, if I bought 2 trees, if I bought 3 trees, I have to be able to service them. I got to be able to, to weed them and take care of them and water them and do all that stuff. I got to take care of them. But if they're not going to stay here anyway, because there's too many trees in this small area, you don't get the karka with it. Amar of Zera. It's really a machlokas tanoam. This idea, the Rava says, if they're too close together, you don't acquire. What do we mean by that? The normal way to plant a vineyard is that there's 4 amas between each row. If you only had 3 amas between each row, that's not a kerem. And therefore, if you planted seeds around that, it wouldn't be a question of climb. You still can't plant any trees, even with any vine, within 6 tvachim. That's also going to make climb. But the idea that you're going to make everything is going to turn into climb, if it's a vineyard mixed with grain seeds, that's only if it's a proper vineyard that has 4 amas between them. So the Tanakhama says you have to have 4 amas. If there's no 4 amas between them, then it's going to be a pruder. Rav Shimon Omer Eino Kerem. I'm sorry, this is the Tanakhama. Shimon's the Tanakhama. Rav Shimon says that's not a kerem, and you wouldn't be chayav on klayim. It is a kerem. What you do is, if instead of 4 amas between each row, there's 3 amas. Okay, so take 3 rows. 3 rows. There's the three rows between the first and second row. There's 3 amas. Between the second and third row, there's 3 amas. Pretend the middle row is not there. So you got 6 amas between row number 1 and row number 3. Just pretend it's not there. So again, that's what the Tanakh, that's what Chum say. It's a kerem. You pretend the middle one's not there. When Rava said, if the trees are too close together, they're going to be taken away. They're going to be uprooted. Therefore, it's not a field. Therefore, you don't get any field with it. That's going like Rav Shimon, who says that if the rows of vines are too close together, that's not a vineyard. That's not made to be a vineyard. So it doesn't have a shame kerem, and you're not chayiv on klayim. That's exactly what Rava said. If the trees are too close together, that they're going to be uprooted. So it's not a sadeh elon at all. It's not a tree field, because you're going to take these trees out. You can't leave. They can't remain that way. Says the Rashbam, right where the lines get wide, the widest lines near the bottom, we have Mohammed Suf and Yesh Lo Karka, Rav Shimon Ein Lo Karka. That's exactly what Rav said. V'haydu Ketanoi the Milsa the Rava the Tanoi Rav Shimon. Rav said goes like Rav Shimon Lo Karbanan. It goes like Rabbanan, meaning he says if they're too close together, it doesn't count. It's not even a field tree. They're going to be uprooted, so you don't get any land with it. Same thing over here by kerem. If they're too close together, it's not considered a kerem. Rashbam says a little bit further, she'ein ben shur l'shur el gimel amas enu kerem. Maybe zer l'shur, you bring seed, ein lok, you don't get marked that mishablo says rekaramacha and mutar machil. You're allowed to eat it. It's not considered climb. It is climb. You still it's also to plant any seeds within 6 tvachim of any vine, but it's not considered a vineyard in that sense. You're not chayav for climb. Okay, Amrin Ardoy, 2 lines from the bottom of the page. Amrin Ardoy, Haiman Desavan Dikla Lechavei. I sold you 1 tree. Now, what did we say before? If you sold 1 tree or 2 trees, if I didn't specify anything else, you don't get any land with it. That's it. After, right? According to Bakiva, yes, you do. But according to Rabbanan, you get no land with it. So when your tree dies, that's it. I can say, please get off my land and get out of here. You're not entitled to build new one. But Ardoy said, Haiman Desavan Dikla Lechavei, Konim Mishifula Atuma. He acquires the tree from the base all the way down into the earth, miles into the earth, unto the depths. He acquires that. In other words, what he means, Rashbam says, Rashbam and Tosfos disagree here a little bit about how far this means. Is he arguing with this idea that we said before, that if you buy 1 tree or 2 trees, you don't get the land? Here he says you get the land underneath it, meaning that you can't dig underneath it. The last line of Rashbam in the Gemara, last line on the page of Rashbam, Hashmin Nami, look at those. That's where he agrees with those. Hashmin Nami, the owner of the field cannot dig under that tree. In other words, if I bought a tree, right? If I bought a tree and I own that tree all the way down into the depths, that means you can't come with your plow and uproot and and destroy my roots. All the way down. Even 1,000 amas down under the ground, I own it all the way down. That's what Nardoi said. Moscow Rabba, so Rabba asks Kasha. Why is it different than if I tell you I'm selling you some garden saffron, right? Which is which if I sell you the garden saffron, it's growing over here. What happens when it finishes growing? You harvest it and that's it. You don't have any land. Still, get rid of your tree. Once it's gone, once you've harvested it, or the tree is dead now, you have nothing. Get out of here. How can you say that you own everything all the way down? Sounds like you can't. I have no rights to it whatsoever. I could just say, once your tree is gone, get out. Elo Marava. So Rava says no. But Mamachas Taina. Naphtali, this is really what you're referring to. This is where the person who bought it has a claim. He says, listen, when I bought the tree, you told me I'm going to get the land with it also underneath. That's different. Until now, we were talking about the cases where I sold Reuben the land, I sold him, Shimon, the trees. Or I sold you the trees and I didn't sell you the land. What are you entitled to? Or I sold you the land and I didn't sell you the trees. What am I entitled to? Nothing was specified. Here he says he has a claim. What's the claim? The claim is I said specifically that you told me specifically I'm going to be able to get this. Ela Merava, we're reading in Rashbam about 15 lines down in Rashbam from the top of the base. The reason I get the karka under the tree, but the buyer tells the seller, the farish, and you specifically said, you explicitly said, I'm getting the tree and the land underneath it. If I own the land, if the first tree dries, I can plant another one. And I had a star. I had a specific thing. So where's the star? I've been here for 3 years, lost it. Case of court commissioner, I'm selling you. It's like I'm selling you. You come to a nursery. I'm selling you some plants that are growing over here. Obviously, I'm selling you the plants. When they're grown, you take them and you don't own the karka underneath it. But if that's Kurka that's where he sell you some saffron. But if I'm selling you a tree, if the buyer claims I bought the tree and I also bought the land underneath it that was in the contract, and I've been here for 3 years, so that's not enough to show it. So if that's the case, Amalei Mark Shisha ben Rav Chisda. Remember Rav Shisha ben Rav Chisda? He was either the oldest son of Rav Chisda or he was the younger son born at Rav Chisda's elderly age. He said to Rav Ashi, if that's the case, let's say he really only sold. Let's say the seller really only sold him the tree like saffron. Meaning I didn't sell him the thing. Meaning the lokeach now says the purchaser says I bought the tree and I bought the land underneath it too. I had a star, but 3 years have passed. 3 years have passed. But let's say he really only sold him the tree. Right? We said before, if you don't hold like a bekivin, you sell him 1 tree or 2 trees, you don't get the karka. So what happens if he really only sold him the tree and he didn't sell him the karka? So what's going to happen then? What should the seller have done to protect himself? Remember, we had said, let's say he really only sold him the tree. The buyer is selling. The buyer says, I bought the land and I bought the tree and I bought the land underneath it. So I'm entitled to always rebuild, always plant another tree there. Right? I had a star, but I lost it. 3 years have passed. Well, the buyer could always say that. What is the seller supposed? What if the seller says, no, I'm only selling you the tree? Either he said it's stam, I'm only selling the tree, or even he specified only the tree and not the land. So after 3 years, the buyer could say, no, I bought the land too and I lost the star. How is the seller supposed to protect himself? Right? What should he have done? The answer is he should have protested during the 3 years. Right? He should have said something during 3 years. By the way, you should know you're on my land, you're entitled to use the tree, but you don't own the land. If you don't say that, we had the same Gemara before the other day. Hani Mashkanta the Surah. Remember Mashkanta the Surah? But there's a Malva in the law, but the Malva lends him $10,000 for 10 years, right? And the Loba gives him his land as a collateral. The Malva normally the Malva can't eat the payers because that would be rebid. But the Mashkanta the Surah says, you know what? I'm selling you lending you the money $10,000 for 10 years, and I'm taking your land as collateral. I will occupy that land and eat the payers for 10 years, and I'll deduct $1,000 a year, and that's not rebid. Why? Because I might gain, I might lose. It might be worth $1,000 the fruits, it might be worth less. So again, how is the Loba though supposed to protect himself? The Malva lent him $10,000. The Loba gave him his field for 10 years. And we said that's a fair deal. There's no rebid over there. After 10 years, he gives it back. What happens if the Malva takes his IOU and hides it, puts it in his safe, and after 10 years, he says, you know what? This land is mine. I bought it from you 10 years ago. Right? How is the Loba now, the real owner of the field, how is he supposed to protect himself? The Malva, we had the same Gemara the other day. Right? The cost of love. That's what does it say in Manshan Skur? But when these years are over, after 10 years, take the Garada below Kesef. You'll get the land back, and you don't have to pay anything because I ate $1,000 worth a year, and that was the deal that we said. Again, if the Malva, right? If the Malva who lent him the money, and he has the IOU, and the IOU says this land is collateral for the loan, but the Malva tears up the shtar or throws it away. The Malva says, "Listen, no, the land is mine. I bought it from you." Does he believe? If that would be the case, if he would be believed, with the Rabbanan have made such a takana that you can have mashkanta surah, something that's going to cause a loss, right? How is the lova supposed to protect himself? The answer is the lova who owns the karka should have protested within every 3-year period, at least once in every 3 period, in front of Adam and said, "Listen, you should know. I know you're entitled to the land. You're entitled to work the land because we had a loan." And you're entitled to stay on the land for 10 years, but the land is mine. Be aware that the land is mine. So basically we're saying is this: if you sell somebody 1 or 2 trees, not according to Rabbanan. Kiva says even 1 or 2 trees, you get the land. But normally, according to Rabbanan, if I sell you 1 or 2 trees, you don't get the land, but you're entitled to the tree. After the tree dies, you're not entitled to it. But how do I protect myself that you can't claim afterwards that you bought the tree with the land also, and you lost the shtar? I got to protest within every 3 years and say, you have the land, you have the tree, you don't have the land. And that's a chazaka. So today we've had both chazaka at the beginning of this year. We had the chazaka of acquiring something. They made a chazaka. That means you just acquired it. Here we're talking about the regular chazaka of 3 years that gives you presumptive title to the land or to whatever you bought, slaves or whatever it was. All right, we'll pick him here tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem from the Mishnah. Have a good day. Pardon? If you planted or bought, if you bought 3 trees, then you get the land with it also. Yeah, it's your land. Yes, you can dig it over there too, because you bought that land. You bought the land between the trees and the area around the trees to service the trees. Correct.
But he's got 5 trees without
specifying. Right.
the land.
That's how you think today. Right. But in those days, that's how it was. Maybe that's what it was. We're talking about a case where he bought 3 trees. Can I buy 3? He bought the 3 trees. What's the assumption? He gets the land with it or not? That's when
then he needs access.
Right, needs access to it. Right. So today you'd have lawyers, and that's how lawyers make their money.